Good day everyone. I am Roberto Dinting Jr. With this video presentation, I and my partner Benjamin Riparto will give you some insights about the history of nutrition of the Philippines. With the hope that you would learn some important points with this lesson. So let's start. History of nutrition in the Philippines. The word nutrition first appeared in 1551 and comes from the Latin word nutrere, meaning to nourish. Today, we define nutrition as the sum of all processes involved in how organisms obtain nutrients, metabolize them, and use them to support all of life's processes. Historical timeline of nutrition in the Philippines. Ancient Filipino diet and health. Ancient diet is mainly determined by food's accessibility, which involves location, geography, and climate, while ancient health is affected by food consumption apart from external factors such as diseases and plagues. There are still a lot of doubt about this ancient diet due to lack of evidence. Similar to what anthropologist Amanda Henry has said, there are a lot of time periods in the human history, but there are only theories to answer questions on what people actually ate then. Only recently have traces been discovered in what was left of these people. There are methods used in determining ancient diet. The first method is paleofacies. These are ancient human feces found in archaeological excavations that help identify the food, diet, and nutrition of the ancient people. There is a high quantity of paleofacies because everyone does it and they do it anywhere. Not only does it give the DNA of a single organism, but also the DNA of everything it ate. The study of paleofacies has actually helped eliminate the belief that ancient people subsidized on forage berries. The next one is the tartar. This is a hard substance that builds up on human teeth after dental plaque solidifies. Because ancient teeth still hold onto tiny pieces of food and bacteria, the study of tartar can help reveal what people ate and information on an individual's health. Methods used in determining ancient health. Ancient people, especially Filipinos, don't have formal professional doctors. There are only men in each group or tribe who have knowledge of healing herbs and practices. These healers, who are also called albularyo today, know unique methods of determining the condition of his or her patients. No mineral medicines are used. They highly depend on the herbs, bark and roof of trees, leaves of plants, and vegetables for their medicine. Diseases. Ancient Filipinos did not believe that their diet and eating habits affect their health. They believed that allergies, food sensitivities, and other diseases that may be seen outside of the body are effects of spirits' actions. Diseases that don't have outside of the body symptoms, like diabetes, heart disease, or kidney disease, were ignored. They only believed that their diet can affect their teeth. To avoid tooth decay, they chewed betel or betel nut or tobacco because they believed that this killed the worms that were brought by drinking water or eating food. What exactly was in their paleo diet? Paleo means the ancient forms of diet. Amigarong, researcher at the Archaeology Division at the National Museum of the Philippines, says that food sources in the Philippines, especially plants, haven't differed much then as now. She adds that plants collected for this study serve as staple food since prehistoric time. What that means is that it includes indigenous varieties of sugarcane, rice, and millet, meaning ancient Filipinos knew how to grow these crops. And if you momentarily blank on what the Banawi rice terraces are, that's pretty close to one of the sites, Dr. Garong said. Prehistoric Filipinos, like many people across the world who live in coastal areas, knew that seaweed was a delicious and really nutritious source of food. There were fish of every size, shape, and color. There were gastropods. We say gastropods, univalve animals like snails. Bivalves, meaning to say two valves. Example, oysters, scallops, and mussels. Coconut crabs, shellfish of all kinds. Early ancestors of things like catfish, tilapia, mudfish, dolphin fish, and flying fish that you see in some Philippine markets today. Across the archipelago, and especially in mountainous areas as we expected, our ancestors hunted and killed a lot of wild game, including carabao, deer, and wild boar. They trapped smaller creatures like bats, civet cats, low-flying birds, and other kinds of local fowl like chickens. When they learned how to domesticate animals, a lot of them learned how to herd goats and keep pigs to add to the community's food supply. The Spanish influence on Filipino cuisine. Nobody expects the Spanish expedition, certainly not us, the Filipinos who before the colonial period were enjoying not just the bounty of indigenous species, but spices from the southern trade routes. Spain and the rest of Europe were undergone a culinary revolution. While the potato, tomato, corn, and chilies were at first regarded with suspicion in European court, succeeding generations of botanists and agriculturists were able to realize their potential. The first record of a potato being eaten in Spain was in 1573 in Seville. The Spanish peninsulares ate their fabadas stews at home, made with beans from the New World, and taught their Filipino servants how to make it for them. But the most lasting influence that the Spanish colonial period had on Philippine cuisine was the introduction of new domesticated animals. The European pig, cow, and chicken came to dominate the indigenous species. The impact of the Spanish influence on local cuisine is very much evident during religious feasts, especially at Christmas. Most of these special occasion dishes trace their roots to the Spanish colonial days. When the Spaniards arrived, they brought with them ingredients and labor-intensive cooking methods that were unknown in the Philippines. Roasted whole pigs, the rich meat stews, and dairy-based sweets, the Spaniards were considered luxuries to the locals. Consequently, in the Filipino home, these dishes were reserved only for special days like fiestas and Christmas. It is hardly surprising that the Noche Buena feast and the Christmas Day meals are laden with four special occasions only: Spanish dishes and local adaptations of Spanish dishes like lechon, pochero, fabada, paella, morcon, embutido, lechiflan, and choros are only some of the favorite Christmas dishes. The American era was during 1898 to 1918. After the end of Spanish rule, the Filipino Revolutionary Government was established, including a Bureau of Public Health. Although the Americans have been an ally in the fight against the Spaniards, the Americans soon seized control of the Philippines with the mission to uplift and civilize. The Philippinization of health in 1918 to 1941. The Philippinization of health services started when Dr. Vicente de Jesus, the first Filipino Assistant Director of the Department of Public Instruction, became director in 1919. Leonard Wood, together with ex-Governor General William Forbes, Wood found the health status of the Philippines to be below par. When you say below par or below an accepted standards, cases of typhoid, tuberculosis, and other preventable diseases were rampant. Facilities and trained medical personnel were insufficient to care for the almost 10 million Filipinos. Under Wood's administration, importance was given to health education, especially for mothers and young children. Prevention rather than treatment was a key strategy. An Act number 3029 was established, which required school children to go through a health examination at least once a year. American public health efforts. Children were encouraged to play outdoors at least an hour a day to improve breathing and cleanse their blood. Regular bowel movement, especially among children, was encouraged by letting children drink at least 8 glasses of water every day, eating green and leafy vegetables such as cabbage, sweet potato leaves, and mustard. Fresh fruit became part of regular meals that were scheduled at regular hours. Everyone was drilled into having individual cups and plates for drinking or eating. Use of cups or plates that have been previously used was discouraged unless these were washed with hot water and soap. Table manners as part of hygiene were also taught. For instance, food should never be touched, and instead, knives, forks, and spoons should be used. A clean fork or spoon should be used in taking food from a dish, and once it has been placed in the mouth, it should never be put into a dish that other people would be eating. In order to gain following for American public health efforts, Americans often discussed Filipino bodies in striking and intimate terms. The images of physical degeneracy, stuntedness or deficiency, or the image of the body as living corpse were used to emphasize the importance of health and nutrition. The cholera campaign on American period. On 20 March 1902, Dr. Richard Strong, director of the biological laboratory, examined two patients at the San Juan de Dios Hospital and confirmed that they had cholera. Filipinos were warned against eating indigestible fruits and raw vegetables. Market inspections were conducted. Street peddling was absolutely prohibited. Domestic animals that lived beneath people's houses were disallowed, while bodies of deceased animals were burned. Sanitary officers took household census, checked for latrines, buckets, and so on. This meant that sanitary officers could enter homes at any time to search for vermin. When we say vermin, these are the insects, pests like flies, mosquitoes, bugs, rats, etc. And to disinfect premises where there were outbreaks of chickenpox, cholera, diarrhea, diphtheria, dysentery, enteritis, plague, and smallpox. In June 1902, the deaths reported from convulsions of children alone exceeded the combined mortality for Manila from the following diseases: biribiri, bubonic plague, cholera, dysentery, malarial fevers, typhoid fever, and smallpox. According to T.R. Marshall, Chief Health Inspector for Manila, the prevailing high infant mortality rate was due to improper care and feeding of infants were seen as the primary cause of high infant mortality. Fresh milk was difficult to obtain and when available was either of poor quality or contaminated through improper handling. Tiki-Tiki. Beginning in 1903 and continuing to the years 1910 to 1912, research on infant mortality were already being done. According to Filipino physicians Manuel Guerrero and Jose Albert and their American colleague V. L. Andrews, the main cause of infant mortality was actually beriberi or taon, as the Filipinos called it, since it was observed that roosters grew strong and sturdy after being given the tiki-tiki. Doctors assumed that if it was good enough for the roosters, it definitely would be good enough for babies. Indeed, tiki-tiki helped reduce beriberi among infants and children. The Mosaic Intermediate School in Tondo, Manila in 1910. To further prevent infant mortality, a class for mothers was opened at the Mosaic Intermediate School in Tondo, Manila in 1910 by Miss Ashby, under the supervision of the Board of Health. Mothers were taught to take care of themselves and their baby for pregnancy and on how to prepare a balanced meal. Gota de Leche Society. Since the milk supply in Manila was unsafe, health officials lobbied to have a sterilizing plant. Working with Gota de Leche Society, a private non-profit milk feeding organization for malnourished infants founded in 1907, the Bureau of Health requested for the passage of an ordinance requiring the pasteurization of milk and indicating an expiration date for its consumption. The balanced diet for school children. In considering a balanced diet for school children, school officials also emphasized regular hours for meals. Instructions were issued forbidding children to come to school without breakfast, and eating between meals was discouraged as it spoiled the appetite for the regular meal. Eating sweets between meals was also considered bad practice, as sweets should be part of the regular meal. Children who were undernourished from lack of appetite were made to have longer meal intervals to make them more hungry. A balanced diet guide for breakfast, dinner or lunch, merienda or tea break, and supper based on available food in the Philippines was eventually made and distributed to the Filipinos. The Commonwealth Act 430. On May 31, 1939, the Department of Health and Public Welfare was established through Commonwealth Act 430, an act to create the Department of National Defense and Department of Health and Public Welfare. Commonwealth Act 430 Section 3 states that the Department of Health and Public Welfare were charged with the protection of the health of the people, the maintenance of sanitary conditions, and the proper enforcement of laws relative to the health, sanitation, and social services, and for these purposes it was exercised executive supervision over those bureaus, offices, and services which, in the opinion of the President, were properly within the jurisdiction of the said department. By now, the Tidings-McDuffie Act had been ratified and the Philippines was on its way to independence. The post-independence period. Summary of selected legislation related to Philippine nutrition. In 1947 was the creation of the Philippine Association of Nutrition, or the PAN. The PAN was critical in the formation of the Philippine Institute of Nutrition, or PIN, which eventually became the FNRI. In 1947, under Executive Order Number 94, the creation of the Philippine Institute of Nutrition was established. The Philippine Institute of Nutrition was created to be the clearinghouse for nutrition data under the Office of the President. When we say clearinghouse, they are the one that collects and gives information about nutrition. The PIN eventually became the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, which was established as the principal government research institute for food and nutrition. For the year 1958, under Republic Act 2058, it was the reorganization of the PIN into the Food and Nutrition Research Center, or the FNRC. In 1959 was the creation of the Nutrition Foundation of the Philippines, NFP. The NFP is a private organization conceived to help the government promoting better nutrition for Filipinos. For the year 1971, under the Executive Order number 285, Nutrition and Food and Agricultural Council was established. The NFAC was the forerunner of the NNC, the Nutrition, Food and Agricultural Council under the Department of Agriculture was created and tasked to coordinate all nutrition and food activities of both the government and the private sector. For the year 1974, the NNC was established as a policymaking body through the Nutrition Act of the Philippines, Presidential Decree number 491. The Nutrition Act of the Philippines in 1974 was a milestone in the history of Philippine nutrition. This law made nutrition a priority concern of the government and mandated that the nutrition program be implemented by all agencies concerned in nutrition in an integrated fashion. The NNC formulates policies and strategies, coordinates and planning, monitoring and evaluation of the nutrition program, and facilitates the release of funds as well as requests for grants and loans by governmental and non-governmental organizations. In 1974, Nutrition Center of the Philippines was established. The NCP is a private, non-stock, non-profit organization that engage research and program development in nutrition. In 1995, the NCP conducted a wet flour fortification study that showed substantial retention of vitamin A in flour and pandesal or wet bun without any organoleptic changes. 2 years later, the efficacy of vitamin A fortified pandesal was assessed by a randomized controlled trial among school children in 4 rural schools. After a 6-month intervention that provided each child with 60 grams of each fortified or non-fortified pandesal daily, the number of children with an inadequate liver stores of vitamin A was reduced by 50%. For the year 1975, it was the reorganization of the FNRC into the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, or FNRI. The government, through the FNRI, developed and transferred the technology of fortification of cooking oil and sugar with vitamin A to the food industry. The FNRI developed the technology of fortification of rice with iron. An efficacy trial showed that consumption of iron-fortified rice improved iron status. Biofortified rice has also been shown to be effective. In 1977, under Presidential Decree number 1569, was the creation of Barangay Health Scholars, or the BNS. The BNS was a pilot project by the NCP in cooperation with the government. This was later institutionalized through this law. The BNS are carefully selected volunteers from the barangay who undergo intensive training in the delivery of practical nutrition services, monitoring the growth of preschool children, communication of simple nutrition messages to parents, particularly pregnant and lactating women, and timely delivery of food and pharmaceutical supplements to targeted women and children. In the year 1995, under Republic Act 7883, was the creation of incentives for barangay health workers. The BNS is further strengthened by another volunteer, the Barangay Health Worker or the BHW. These volunteers render primary health care services, including nutrition, in a cluster of 20 to 30 households in every barangay. As an incentive to volunteerism, a law enacted in 1995 grants the BHWs hazard and subsistence allowances, educational programs, civil service eligibility, and preferential access to loans. These benefits go to more than 200,000 BHWs in the country. For the year 1986, EO 51, and in year 1992, under Republic Act 7600, are laws intended for breastfeeding. In 1995, Republic Act 8172 is for Salt Iodization Act, and in year 2000 or 2K is the Food Fortification Act. The remark of this law is the issuance of executive orders and enactment of legislation related to nutrition, a result of the multi-sectoral consultation and coordination that was made possible by the Nutrition Act of the Philippines. So, this ends with my part. Sir Binramin Liparto will now continue with the lesson.
Thank you, sir. My task is to continue our report about the history of nutrition in the Philippines. So just sit there and relax, and I hope that you will listen to my report.
First, I will discuss our status and what are the laws implemented by our government to fight against malnutrition. So the most serious and chronic nutrition problem in the Philippines is protein energy malnutrition or PEM among preschool children based on the nationwide weighing survey in 1978 by Food and Nutrition Research Institute, National Science and Technology Authority. Nearly 70% of preschool children are underweight. Several surveys during the 1970s showed that the section of the country with the highest prevalence of malnutrition was the Eastern and Western Visayas. So the consequences of this early malnutrition are stunted physical growth, reduced energy to learn and develop, higher incidence of illness and disease, and of course, a higher mortality rate. Another consequence, often overlooked, is the emotional and psychological impact on society when a majority experience misery in early life, reducing their ability to cope up with life's problem. There are major interventions made by our government as food and nutrition program is considered, namely the nutrition information and education, health protection, food assistance, and food production. So in nutrition information and education, the priority target group for this intervention is mothers of malnourished preschool children 0 to 83 months of age. The goal is to increase the mother's knowledge and improve their child feeding practices. In health protection, services are both curative and rehabilitate. Curative means or curative measure means includes medical services to the moderately and severely undernourished preschoolers susceptible to infection. Wards for recovery from malnutrition are set up in hospitals or Nutri-Huts in the remote areas. Immunization, deworming services, and sanitation campaigns are among the preventive measures. In food assistance, as an emergency measure to improve the nutritional status of the moderately malnourished preschoolers, supplementary feeding programs are undertaken. Locally available food commodities are encouraged and promoted. While the food production, the primary goal of this intervention is to promote backyard and school gardens to increase household consumption of more highly nutritious food. Malnutrition remains to be a challenge in the region despite of the decline in the under 5 mortality rate. The decline of breastfeeding, compounded by inappropriate complementary feeding practices, is a cause for alarm because of the consequent undernutrition and risk for childhood mortality and morbidity. So one of the global nutrition targets for 2025 is a 40% reduction in stunting. Thus, the Philippines is committed to this target under the Global Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, or SUN, ensuring optimal nutrition in the first 1,000 days of life from a mother's pregnancy up to a child's second year of life. So there are 7 program components of the target of 2025. So namely, breastfeeding practices, complementary feeding practices. The third one is micronutrient supplementation. The fourth one is universal salt iodization. Fifth one is food fortification. The sixth one is Mother-Baby Friendly Health Initiative, or MBFHI. And lastly, the Philippine Integrated Management of Acute Malnutrition, or PMAM. So let's discuss one by one about the program components. First, the breastfeeding practices. So breastfeeding practices includes exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months and extended breastfeeding up to 3 years. So in exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, infants shall be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life to achieve optimum growth and development. Only breast milk should be given and no other food or drinks, not even water, while the vitamins and medicines are permitted by physicians. While in extended breastfeeding up to 3 years, although volume of breast milk consumed declines as complementary foods are added, breast milk contributes significantly as it provides 1/3 to 2/3 of average total energy intakes towards the end of the first year. So the second one, the complementary feeding practices. Infants shall be given appropriate complementary foods at age 6 months in order to meet their evolving nutritional requirements. This means that it should be given timely, adequate, safe, and properly fed. To ensure access to appropriate complementary foods through diversified approaches and use of home and community-based technologies, use of locally available and culturally acceptable foods, and low-cost complementary foods. And the third one, the micronutrient supplementation, includes the supplementation of vitamin A, iron, iodine, and calcium. So, based on the updated guidelines on micronutrient supplementation, the following are the priority targets of micronutrient supplementation. So, in universal vitamin A, supplementation shall be continued to be provided to infants and children 6 to 59 months of age. Vitamin A supplementation shall be given to children at risk, particularly those who with measles, persistent diarrhea, severe pneumonia, and severely malnourished children, to help re-establish body reserves of vitamin A and protect against severity of infection and prevent complication. Iron supplementation shall be provided to pregnant and lactating women and low birth weight babies and children 6 to 11 months of age. In addition, anemic and underweight children from 1 to 5 years of age shall be provided with iron supplementation, including adolescents girls enrolled in grade 7 to grade 10. So in iodine supplementation shall be provided to women of reproductive age group school age children in areas when the urinary iodine excretion of less than 50 liters in more than 20% of the population, while the calcium supplementation for pregnant women shall be provided to reduce the risk of developing gestational hypertensive disorders and associated health problems, thereby improving maternal and newborn health and nutrition outcomes through provision of daily calcium supplementation. So the universal salt iodization, the fourth one, families shall be encouraged and educated on the use of iodized salt in the preparation of foods for older infants and young children and even adults to prevent iodine deficiency disorders, which is prevalent in Zamboanga Peninsula. While the fifth one, food fortification. So food fortification of staple foods like oils and flour and salt to include processed food was undertaken to ensure that older infants and young children receive adequate amounts of micronutrients. While the sixth one, the Mother Baby Friendly Health Initiative, so it aims to promote and support and protect breastfeeding in infant and young child feeding practices in all health facilities, and the need to transform these facilities, government or private hospitals and lying-in, rendering maternal and newborn care services into mother-baby friendly health institution. While this last one, the Philippine Integrated Management of Acute Malnutrition, so this aims to support the implementation and expansion of quality treatment for children suffering from the most severe and acute form of undernutrition to severe acute malnutrition. These children with severe acute malnutrition are the most risk of dying as a result of their undernutrition. So roll-out trainings for the management of severe acute malnutrition are ongoing in the provinces of Zamboanga del Sur and Zamboanga City. Okay, that's all our report. Thank you and thank you for listening.